our next steps to space.
This time we go back to the moon to learn to live, to work, to invent, to create.
Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this live broadcast. We're in hour number 2 here at TNT, Today's News Talk. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. And as you heard from our previous guests, there has been an incredible political realignment and a huge backlash to the support that Western governments have been giving Israel over the situation right now in Gaza, which is turning into a humanitarian disaster, proportions of which we have not seen in a long, long time. Could be one of the worst ever situations of its kind. Now, I want to bring on to the program someone who needs no introduction. Jackie Walker. She is a political activist herself, excommunicated from the UK Labour Party. She is also a great advocate for human rights and especially for the people of Palestine. Jackie is on the line right now. Jackie, thank you for joining us this week.
Thank you for asking me.
Jackie, we've seen some incredible things over the last couple of months. We are living in extraordinary times. We have seen things in politics that just are incredible, quite breathtaking. To see a sitting prime minister take to the podium in front of Downing Street, not to give a State of the Union address or to make some sweeping, but to deride a candidate of what they regard as a fringe party in a by-election. I mean, what is going on here, Jackie? I want to hear your reaction to the situation and then talk about the broader issues. But go ahead, Jackie.
Well, I think that's a measure of how really scared they are. And in a way, I mean, that's thrilling for people like me, because it just shows that they realize how deep our ideas have gone and how much our critique has been taken on by so many in the electorate. So for me, that's in a way great that that's happened. But if you think about it, it's really shocking. As you say, this is one person getting into Parliament, and yet they're that scared. But the way I see this, and I don't know how much of this your listeners might know, but to me, this is, if you like, the second part of the anti-Semitism witch hunt, which has been going on in the UK, certainly since Jeremy Corbyn became the leader of the opposition.
And just for those of our listeners and viewers, Jackie, who aren't familiar with your story, you've been in ground zero of this issue from the very beginning. Just give us a very brief summary of your story and then bring us to the present day on this.
Okay, so I'm either very fortunate or not to be both Jewish and Black. I've been an activist, an anti-racist activist, probably 40 or 50 years, or maybe since the time I was born. I was actually born in America. I've got an American passport, and my parents kind of came together during the civil rights movement. My father was from Russia, my mother was from Jamaica, and my mother was deported from America for un-American activities, which I'm kind of proud of. But she was the victim of torture and was broken through it. But if you like, I've actually been in this role since, well, it's my raison d'etre. And so I've always done that, whether I've been a teacher, whether I've been a lecturer, when I've been a writer, with everything. And I've been a political activist on the left for some time. So I was supporting Jeremy Corbyn and the left for years before he became leader of the Labour Party. And of course, what happened, for those of you who don't know, is that as soon as Jeremy Corbyn became the leader, we started to get these accusations of anti-Semitism. And I mean, it's a bit disputed between me and another activist called Tony Greenstein, but I'm either the first or second person who was expelled from the Labour Party for being an anti-Semite, even though, you know, my husband is Jewish and I'm a member of 3 Jewish organizations. That doesn't matter, because in this this little weaponization that's going on, what matters is not whether you're Jewish or not, not whether you're black or not. What matters is whether you're a Zionist or not. And part one of this in the UK was to get rid of Corbyn. And we nearly got him in, of course, as Prime Minister in 2017. But anyway, it was to get rid of Corbyn, to smash the left. So they did part one, and then Starmer was elected. Starmer was elected as leader of the British Labour Party, and he was elected on a whole load of lies. And his absolute premise from day one has been to smash the left. And we have the continuation of that. And for that project, again, it doesn't matter if you're Tory, which is on the right, kind of centre right, they like to call themselves, or in the Labour Party, they both want to smash the left. And the media overwhelmingly wants to help them do it. So if you like, I was very actively, I think I was the first person to organise a pushback on it. On that, there is no doubt. And I organised a campaign. I wrote a play. I took that play nationwide. I even came to the United States with it. I actually did a performance in Madison in Wisconsin. So I took it over to Europe, had a great performance in Berlin. But it was the first organised resistance to that. And I haven't stopped. And the wonderful thing that I have to my advantage, because I don't have a job and I'm not in league with any political party, and they can't get to me in any way, is that it doesn't matter what they say to me or about me. I've had threats of rape. I've had threats of being burnt. I've had threats that my grandchildren would be hung outside of my window. It doesn't matter. They can say what they want. I've gone through that, and I just speak as I and my comrades find it.
You also produced a very provocative documentary film, I believe it's called Witch Hunt,
Yes.
recently. And it was so threatening to the establishment that they pulled every trick in the book to make sure that nobody could watch this documentary film, which you screened at a number of high-profile Labor Party events. There were bomb threats and so forth, but that's a powerful film. I got a chance to see it as well, alongside many others. And we also spoke about this at the Beautiful Days Festival in the Rebel Tent over the summer, a great event. But Jackie, you know, when you start producing films, when you start putting stuff out into the public discourse, the political mainstream conversation on this, it really sends shockwaves to the highest levels of the establishment. I think you really reap the backlash of that right now. I mean, do you have any plans for any other similar projects? Or certainly, you know, that's a film that I think everybody needs to see.
Well, I think I'm working with people who are making other films about that. And I kind of feel that my purpose at the moment is to be here and stand as a witness and be at that interface between Blackness and Jewishness as well, which is in itself a very interesting one, and at times a very volatile one. But of course, the election of Galloway has put a lot of issues into the ring that weren't there before. And where I'm going to go with that, I'm still thinking. This is just like you in the States, you know, this year is election year for us. And I said a year ago that this was going to be one of the nastiest and most violent elections that we have actually seen. And I think that's going to be true. And what I am doing, I've got my own kind of YouTube channel. And for example, what I did do recently is do a response to Sunak's speech on the steps, where I had a backdrop of number 10 Downing Street. So what I'm doing now is, if you like, I'm using those skills to get out to people and to actually talk speak the words of resistance. And I think that in itself is a very important task, to come in a very topical and timely manner and speak against what is being said about us.
Where I think you talked about the political left and why this type of political speech, discourse, worldview is particularly threatening to the establishment is when you have, they're all fine on domestic issues. You can kind of play Punch and Judy on that. But when it comes to foreign policy and you have a party that has very, very clear, well-articulated positions, when you have people like Ken Livingston, people like Jeremy Corbyn, Chris Williamson, yourself, and now George Galloway, if you compare, you just do a straight comparison of how these people are talking about issues, and you compare that to, let's say, any of the mainstream conservative or labor people that are sort of at the forefront of that party now, it makes them look like they're sort of in junior high school at best on these issues. But that's where the real threat is, isn't it, Jackie? I think this is why the American deep state takes an interest in people like you, people like Chris, people like Jeremy. It's because of this, because you have potentially, you're going to disrupt this rules-based international order, and especially what's happening now with Israel and Palestine. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's my job. That's my task. In fact, I've been told that the Hebrew root of my name is actually the usurper, and that the job of the usurper in terms of what happened in, the ancient Judaic tribes was to go in and disrupt the status quo, so that people would actually have to think in new ways about what was going on. And I see that very definitely as my role. The thing about the UK that people need to understand, and especially Starmer in particular, in terms of the Labour Party, will stay absolutely in step with the US. He will not go out of those bounds of the US. And our job in terms of the left is to push him on that. And he's having a really, really difficult time. And the analogy is this, when we were fighting against South African apartheid, we never had anybody in the Labour Party who was telling us that we shouldn't be doing it. This is different. This issue about Israel, Palestine, Gaza is very, very different one. And this is a soft spot for them, and they know it in the Labour Party. And it's making them very worried. And that's the scale of how worried they are. And I don't know if your listeners realize that, but what they're proposing at the moment is to have a law against any MPs supporting any pro-Palestinian groups and also any pro-climate groups. Now, this is really difficult for them, however, because they're supposed to be doing this in defense of democracy. So the fight is on. I mean, the fight is on. And what we're going to do about that, well, who knows yet? But I certainly think that what we've seen on the streets here, and don't believe what the BBC and, whoever tells you, what you've got in the streets here is usually around 500,000 people just in London coming on the streets regularly on a Saturday to demand action and change on what's happening with Israel and Gaza. And that's mass, if you like, civil, I don't even want to call it civil disobedience. I think it's civil responsibility. Because the irony of what's happening here is that the people who are demanding that we stop killing mostly women and children, that we stop starving those people to death, are now being called the villains of the peace. But that's no different in a way than what was happening back in Jeremy Corbyn's time, when people who had been lifelong anti-racist were suddenly being called racist. So this is a real ideological battle that's going on. And at the moment, they're losing the ideological battle, which is why you saw the Prime Minister out on the steps of Downing Street.
And that the one thing that's really created so much damage to politics, especially in Britain, in the U.S. too, is this accusation that's flung around of anti-Semitism at anybody who's criticizing the policy of Israel or even defending the rights of Palestinians, as we can see. But what's happened is extraordinary, Jack, and perhaps you can comment on this. The sting of this accusation has really worn off. Is it a case that they've really over-egged the pudding on this one post-October 7th? Because it seems like that it just doesn't have the potency that it did before October 7th. And I think it's the scale of the human tragedy that we have witnessed is something like really crazy and unprecedented. And I'd hate to say there's a silver lining from this tragedy, but that seems to be one of the silver linings from this, because hasn't this issue just destroyed British politics in particular? Go ahead, your comments on this generally, Jack.
Look, there is now a huge divide between the executive, those who rule us, and most people. Most people in the UK, I think it's around 70%, want to see not a temporary ceasefire, but a ceasefire, and they want to see it now. There is no doubt we've won the argument. And there's also no doubt in this that we are going to continue winning the argument. And if you look, when you have people doing things like, I don't know if you're getting this in the States, but over here, we have Zionists now saying that the whole of Ireland is anti-Semitic, that everybody under the age of 30 is anti-Semitic, that all Black people are anti-Semitic, that all anti-Zionist Jews are anti-Semitic. That's something like 30% of all Jews in this country are anti-Semitic. And when you actually have, the representatives from the IDF coming on and calling starving people desperate to feed their children a mob, when you have the IDF opening fire, because that's what they did, actually, that's what all the proof says that they did, opening fire on these people, then of course, actually they're doing our job for us. Again and again, the Zionists, the Israelis are being proven to be liars. The consistency is with the fact that they are lying and lying over and over again.
And for years, Jackie, yourself, your colleagues, the people you've been standing shoulder to shoulder with on this issue, you guys have been sounding the alarm as loud as possible. You've been relentless in your activism, but it's always been the case, Jackie, over the years that some people just couldn't get it. They just didn't get the essence of the issue enough to bring them over to your side. Tell us how things have changed in the last 5 months. Has there been a transformation in this paradigm?
Oh, absolutely. That's why for me this time, I think when we met at the festival, we spoke about this. The things that we have been saying are going to happen, are unfolding in front of us at the moment. What is extraordinary, and I think you're getting this in terms of US politics as well, is how destructive this is being for the Labour Party. And I think for the Democratic Party as well, it's being quite destructive. Now, the difference is, I am pretty sure that Starmer is still going to get in, and he's going to get in with the majority. But I also think that that's only going to be the beginning of the story in the UK. And that's so important, the level of awareness that there is now, not just about the situation in Gaza, the situation with Israel, but the fact that our leaders lie to us all the time, that our leaders have cheated us, is just phenomenal. And that is reflected everywhere you look in every poll.
No, it is. It is, and it's actually trending upwards. Those trends are in the U.S. polls, Jackie. Even been an increase in disapproval since December for the White House, and then sympathy for the Palestinians has increased. Normally, there's issue fatigue in the West, but not on this issue. It's literally confounded all of the sort of standard polling metrics on these types of issues. It's incredible. So it's just going to continue to become a more important issue over the next couple of months and in the U.S. election cycle for sure. And I think it's going to reshape, eventually it's going to reshape a lot of the constituencies that a lot of people took for granted. That's the same old story in all of politics, isn't it, Jackie? Is parties taking for granted their constituencies on issues. Which isn't going to happen anymore on this one in particular. But we've got a couple of minutes left before the end of this segment, Jackie. But I want to give you the floor for the final couple of minutes to share what you think are the really important insights and thoughts that you want to get across to our audience.
Well, I also speak to a lot of people in Africa and China, and I think one thing that hasn't been taken into account is the effects that this is going to have, the long-term effects on sort of American power, on European power, on the sort of moral currency of Euro-America in what is called Global South. I mean, that's lost. That's gone. Nobody out there is going to take seriously again. I mean, it was like when we saw the press conference when somebody asked in the White House, a question, and he said, well, we let people make their own choices. And somebody went, well, except when we invade them. And I think now this is going to be fundamental. And who is taking over on that? Whether you like them or not, China and Russia are speaking out about this. And it's a foolish card to have played.
No, it is. And again, you said some of these other smaller European countries like Ireland taking the moral leadership. Nicaragua is taking Germany to task in the ICJ. South Africa, of course, has shown up everybody when it tabled its genocide case against the state of Israel, probably against incredible threats. Diplomatically and elsewhere behind the scenes. So we're seeing that kind of rise of the non-aligned movement countries, the global South, taking the moral leadership position on this. All the people have been ostracized by, the leading world superpowers on various issues. They're now leading the conversation on these important issues going forward. And we hope that this is going to have a positive effect generally on the general political conversation globally, but it can't come soon enough for the people in Gaza. Sadly, this is a situation that just has to happen now. And is there any indication that Britain or the U.S. is going to capitulate and demand a ceasefire from Israel?
We heard
We
heard what Kamala was saying, wasn't it? I mean, she said we want a ceasefire, and then she went a little gap. Temporary ceasefire. I mean, they really find it hard for the words to come out the mouth. But at the same time, they're still arming Israel, aren't they? So, they're paying for the bombs that are killing the people, that are doing the genocide, and then they want them to stop, but they're not going to stop giving the bombs. I think we're going to see a real problem for the White House and here as well. For Downing Street and Parliament on this. It's going to go on. And the schism between those who rule us and the mass is going to increase.
Jackie Walker, political activist, writer, and also filmmaker as well, and a great voice on such a profound and important issue. We really appreciate you joining us on TNT this week.
Thank you very much.
There she goes, ladies and gentlemen. That's Jackie Walker. That's somebody you want to be following on X, Twitter as well for her hot takes on all of these issues. Definitely a leading voice on this, not just for Britain, but I think globally as well. Let's take a break right now with the network. And on the other side, we're going to connect with our roving correspondent, Basil Valentine, for reactions on Jackie's comments, but also on what's happening, the latest from Israel and Gaza. All this coming up on the other side. I'm Patrick Henningsen. Stay right there.